disclosures of interest? Not seeing any. I'll move on. We don't have presentations this evening. We have a proposed consent agenda. You'll note, colleagues, that there are a number of minutes on the agenda, as well as our annual drinking water report. Would anyone like to amend the proposed consent agenda? Councillor Strachian?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to pull the annual drinking water report from the consent agenda, please.
Great. My thoughts exactly, actually. So we look forward to a more fulsome discussion on that. So then, is there any other proposed changes? Seeing none, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder, and that is for the following consent agenda items to be approved as amended. Who would like to move that? Councillor Sullivan? Deputy Mayor? Thank you. And I'll call the vote. All in favor? Good. Thank you. So that is done. We have no reports from the Office of the CEO this evening, so we'll move straight to the one of the crucial items on the agenda this evening, and that is the interim tax levy. And we'll invite Ms. McPherson to come down and just provide a quick overview. Thank you. Welcome, and just make sure you turn on your mic. Yep, just press one of those buttons to make sure. There you go. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors. I'm Karen McPherson, the tax collector for the municipality. The purpose for bringing this matter forward tonight is to request Council's approval to assist to issue notices and collect the interim taxes for 2023 through a bylaw with a due date of March 31st. And next slide, please. We're through that one. Sorry. And the Municipal Act allows municipalities to set the interim tax rate at 50% of prior year's annualized taxes on all taxable properties. The interim taxes will allow the municipality to manage its cash flow requirements and meet the due date for the county and school board remittances of March 31st, 2023. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. So, colleagues, this is a fairly standard occurrence every time this year in advance of our budget to authorize the municipality to collect property taxes on an interim basis. Any comments or questions? Not seeing any. I'll look for a mover and a seconder then for this motion. Thank you, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Sullivan. The recommendation is that Council approve and enact bylaw 1823 to authorize the tax collector and the treasurer to issue the notification and collect the 2023 interim taxes. If there's no comment or question, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your work is done. All right. Next, we have the Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. You'll note that Council had signaled after our election that we wished to establish 3 new advisory committees, and they were Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, the Housing Advisory Committee, and the Indigenous Advisory Circle. And as a consequence, draft terms of reference have been provided, and I'll look to Council colleagues for any comments or questions on the terms of reference. Thank you. Councillor Strachian.
My comments are, through you, Madam Mayor, are really, I think, more administrative than anything else. I noted that in the different advisory committees, some of the wording is slightly different between them. In particular, the one for the Youth Advisory Committee, which has been had a lot of work done to it, mentions the possibility of virtual or in-person meetings, and the other advisory committees don't allow for those options. And I know that previously, in the previous iterations of these committees, there was a desire from some people to still be able to stay virtual. So I'm just wondering if we can align the language, and there may be other areas as well. That one just stood out for me. If we can align the language among, between those advisory committee TORs to be the same, please. Thank you.
Great, great reflection, Councillor Strachian. So I'll go to Ms. Janeau, and then Councillor Sullivan, I think you have a similar question, is that right? We'll go to you first, and then we'll go to
Okay,
Ms. Janeau.
thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the only thing I noted in the additional thing was that the Active Transportation Committee did not indicate that a member of council would be the co-chair, and that is on all the other terms of reference for the other committees.
Okay. So we'll go to Ms. Janeau for any comments in regards to what's there now. I'm assuming some of these additional changes can be accommodated fairly easily. Is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, absolutely. We can adjust the terms of reference with regard to the virtual options. With regards to the co-chair, I thought, I'll have to go back and check, but I'm pretty sure all of them should be consistent in saying, not dictating that a co-chair has to be a member of council, but I'll go back and double check that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Councillor Barclay.
I'm sure you've captured this, but when we call for applications to our new committees, we'll be once again advertising for people to submit applications to Heritage, because we're short there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Ms. Janeau, if you can just speak to the youth committee. Obviously, we had a fairly lively and successful youth committee. I know that you've highlighted changes to strengthen the role of youth in that committee. Can you just speak to those, please?
Through you, Your Worship. So I've just pulled up some of the changes that were made within the terms of reference. And as you note, the CDAC, that being the Community and Economic Development Committee, as well as the Mayor's Youth, did see more significant changes with regards to the mandate. And we did just take some feedback from the committee members from the past term with regards to what they would want to provide through the roles. So the youth one in particular was updated just to ensure that the youth are really the ones guiding the meeting and dictating what's addressed.
Okay, thank you. And I think it was always a very youth-driven committee, and I'm sure that we look forward to that. But at the same time, the engagement with Mayor and Council is meaningful, I think, because it helps to ground it in the day-to-day realities of the, I think, the functioning of the municipality. So I understand your description. I don't actually note where the changes took place in the terms of reference. Can you point those out, please?
Through you, Your Worship. So in the terms of reference in the attachments to the report, I believe it is in the first section, which is called purpose, and then the second section, which is mandate.
Understood. So we've strengthened the language of what the Youth Advisory Committee is intended to do.
Correct. And in particular, one of the lines we added based on feedback we received was to encourage the youth to help guide our youth engagement as the municipality moving forward.
Understood. Okay. Councillor Strachan?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and I think another valuable point on the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee is that the age range has been expanded as well, that it has been allowing youth as open to membership for youth as young as 11 or 12, grade 7, that has been expanded. Is that correct? I'm reading that correctly?
I'll have to double check, but I believe before it was up to 25 was actually the age limit, and it's been changed now just to reflect more so grades rather than age.
Okay, yeah, so it's a significant change. I think it was 15 to 23 years of age before, and now it's grade 7 through 12.
And just with that in mind, I think it's really important to hear from, youth at various ages and stages. I also reflect on some of the conversation we had in that committee, and I think there's a point at which actually kids are too young for a more sophisticated discussion where sometimes people are sharing personal information. So certainly it is my inclination to say that we couldn't go younger than grade 7. I don't think most grade 6 students would necessarily benefit given the kinds of discussions that have certainly been had up to now. So I do think grade 7 would be the lowest we could go. Councillor Strachan?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. I agree that grade 7 is probably the lowest. I think it's challenging with the younger ones with the older ones mixed in, the confidence level and so on changes, but I think that there's value in having it lowered to there. I'm just wondering, given the makeup last year and or in the last term when we saw the role that some of the older youth played in there and the leadership roles that they could take on because of their own experience and confidence levels, that I'm wondering if capping it at grade 12, if there was a reason for that and not to allow it to go beyond the high school years to, sort of broaden that. I think just that leadership role that they took on, when we saw that with some members, that they helped out sort of bringing some of the younger youth along in their own understanding of their roles and so on.
Ms. Janeau?
Absolutely. We can take consideration from council with regards to the age limit. I would say from my experience with the youth committee in Brockville, we did have a wider range, and older adults were allowed to take part, including myself at the time. And we did find there was that divide where the issues affecting youth in high school was very different than the youth outside of high school, but we can take your direction on this for sure.
I think it's tricky, actually, right, to straddle a super wide age range. Certainly, I think we are undercapitalizing on kids who are still, they're not even kids, they're young adults in the community who have graduated high school, who might be having particular experiences in terms of accessing education and work and housing, and they may look very different from those experiences of kids in high school or junior high school. So, the reality is in this community is that we still get a lot of engagement from residents who skew older rather than younger. So the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee was a structured opportunity to really encourage younger residents to be involved, but I don't know if this committee can accomplish that for everyone under the age of 24. So maybe it gives consideration to another way of having a conversation with older young adults, if you will. It's hard to say. Councillor Strachan?
I agree with you, Madam Mayor, that it's challenging, I think, to straddle that whole age range, bringing it much lower as well from grades 9 and 10 as the lower range to grade 7, I think does skew it in a different direction as well. I'm wondering if some consideration, and again, I don't know if this is the right number, but maybe 23 was a bit too old, because at that point, I say that tongue-in-cheek, too old, that 23, you're already, potentially done college or university or something, you've done some sort of post-secondary, and you're sort of onto, another phase of adulthood, whereas if we lowered it to maybe even 19 or 20, just to give that extra year or two after high school, there's a bit of connection, there's a bit of lived experience, but you're not fully in another direction as well. So I'm just wondering, if I see grade 12, I sort of think, how is this different from a school council? Yes, you're drawing from more people in the community, but you're focused on the same age range as what you would do in most of our secondary schools as well. So I'm just trying to think if maybe there's a happy medium there as well for consideration.
Councillor Barclay?
Yeah, I would support Councillor Strachan's suggestion. I think, with the Kemptville Youth Centre aging them out after 18, we've got those individuals that are a year or two out of high school that, we would lose a chance to echo their voices. But I agree, 25 seems a little too old. After 23, I think most people are on their way somewhere, hopefully a good place, but maybe not. But I think with the youth center, the cutoff at 18, I think it's important to get the 19, 20, 21-year-olds for sure.
Certainly we can see how it works. I think, I'm not quite sure where the rationale came to lower the age. Do we know where that came from? Because I feel that it does significantly change. I think grade 9s and post-high school kids can kind of be in that same space together and do well. I'm not sure about your average 13-year-old. So I guess it raises the question, why are we going to grade 7? Because I'm more comfortable with an age range of 15 to 24 or grade 9, post-high school, than I am with grade 7s participating in a community where I'm not sure they're equipped to really get full value out of it. So I think my suggestion would be is maybe we start at higher, but then that allows us to go older, which I think had been the original age group for the committee, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Through your worship, so the original age range was 15 to 23.
Right, okay. So I think the idea was to try to capture grade 9s who are effectively in high school, because we were getting a lot of grade 9s and 10s. So maybe we can make that adjustment, because I think makes more sense at this stage. Does that work? Yes, Councillor Sullivan, go ahead.
I would agree with that. I think grade 9 to 23 or 22, whatever it was, I think that's a good age range, and they're not too far at the extremes. So I think I agree with you.
Okay. Councillor Strachan?
I agree, through Madam Mayor, that I think grade 7 is too young, I think, in too broad a range if we're going up past high school years. I think that the consideration of not going to 23 maybe, I think maybe 23 is a little bit too far removed from the high school age, that secondary age, that maybe 20 or max 21 may be a better idea. I know it's picking nits at this stage, but I think those extra couple years you're in a different headspace as well. And then on that note, I think in this paragraph, it can be tightened up a little bit so that we're not differentiating between homeschooling and not. We could just say what the age range is and not worry about what the grades are. I think that is probably sufficient.
Okay. Okay, so can those adjustments be made, Ms. Janeau?
Through you, your worship, if I could just get clarification on the minimum age you'd like. I'm just not super aware of ages and grades.
14,
Okay, thank you.
please, thank you.
No, I think you can be in grade 9 and be 14. Yep. Okay, good. Okay, excellent. Anything else on the Youth Advisory Committee? No, okay. So I do have a question, Ms. Janeau. I know that I think am now ex officio on every committee. Is that correct?
Correct.
And where did that direction come from? Because that is not what has happened previously. I've been a full member of committees that I have, through my discussion with council colleagues, we've all decided upon certain committees. I understand the value in having the mayor to be ex officio in all the committees for other reasons, but just can you help me understand the rationale for making that the case for every single committee?
Through your worship, so we revised these terms of reference based on feedback we received following a council session with the CAO, and so we adjusted and added the ex officio members, but we're happy to adjust based on direction from council.
I'm not sure that direction was provided in that way. Council colleagues, I don't know if you recall that. I just, of course, have valued my role in certain committees, and I don't know if I want to be rendered ex officio and have no more active role in any committee for all the committees that we're discussing. Councillor Strachan?
Yeah, it's through you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure how that works with having then 3 council members potentially present. I think that's part of the challenge. I recall a discussion about ex officio roles, but not that any decision was made, I think, in our conversation. So, yeah, perhaps that wasn't as well understood on our side as it was on maybe the CAO side. But I'm not sure how that works, because we're very conscientious of having more than the majority of council members present in any of these meetings. So,
Yes, I'll go to Councillor Barclay and then Ms. Janeau.
I think the distinction is voting member of the committee. And from my reading of the sort of the template changes, that being ex officio, the mayor would not have a vote. And I'm not clear on that. I think it says now up to 2 councillors, so there could be cases, since we've gone from, I guess, originally 8 to, or 4 or 5 to 15 now, council is going to be spread pretty thin with just 5 of us. So I'm not really sure if there's only one councillor on that committee and the mayor is the second, whether or not she should have a vote. I think that's worthy of discussion.
Right. Well, again, I don't know what the best practices are in other municipalities. All I can tell you is that, as you know, I was a very active member of Health and Wellness and Rural and Ag Affairs, and I fulfilled my duties, I think, diligently. But I was a voting member of those committees. The mayor was a voting member, just like the other council colleague was. In your case, Councillor Barclay, you were a very active member of Rural and Ag Affairs. Should we now render the mayor's role completely ex officio for every single committee? I'm not clear. I don't believe that was the direction that was given, because that leaves 4 members of council, right, effectively as the voting members on those committees spread across many, many committees. So I don't think I was looking to not play a valuable role on a very small number of committees like we all did. So I'm just reflecting on the implications of ex officio in this case. So, and I don't know what the best scenario is. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, through you, to you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
The solution may be that in the case where there's just a single councillor, another member of council, that the mayor could fulfill a voting role, but that you don't lose the ability to be ex officio on all the committees, because I think that's pretty standard from what I
Indeed.
understand. It's just the issue is voting. So if there's a single councillor on the advisory committee, then you'd be granted a vote.
Sure, yes. Go ahead, Ms. Janou.
If I may, we did seek legal counsel, unfortunately, after this report was published, but I can read you what we heard back and looking at best practices from other communities as well. So basically, our procedural bylaw will need to be updated to reflect whether, as an ex officio member, the mayor has voting rights or counts towards quorum. Either way can work well. So if the mayor has voting rights and counts towards quorum, that would mean that potentially 3 of 5 council members would be voting at a committee meeting. Staff have looked into other communities and checked with legal to understand how this is viable. So essentially, these are council meetings and are subject to the same procedures, including being public and providing notice, which we already do for committees. In addition, a clerk must be present, and you'll notice in the terms of reference, for each committee, the clerk has delegated authority for staff members to take minutes. And as all decisions of the committee must flow through council, that acts as a stopgap to prevent the committee from moving forward the business of the municipality.
Councillor Trakian?
Through you to Madam Mayor. So if I guess to marry those 2 points up between the deputy mayor and what Ms. Janot has just said, if the mayor was ex officio but could be named as one of the council representatives as only 2, so they would be the 2 council voting members and still remain as having that ex officio role across all committees, so that it would sort of be effectively a hybrid between where we were last time, where there wasn't that ex officio role, and the mayor previously was one of the voting council representatives on the committees. I think maybe that would achieve what I think the mayor is still looking to do, and still allow her to have ex officio in the role, in the meetings as a whole. Before I relinquish the mic, I'm just going to say one more thing. I think the wording in this paragraph makes it a little bit awkward, because at the end of listing all of the memberships, it says that they all have voting rights. So if the intent was to have the ex officio role when the mayor is in the ex officio role and not mentioned as one of the council voting members, if she's not to vote, then that shouldn't be in the same line. I think the wording on this is some of the confusion as well. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, just going to Councillor Strachan's point, I believe that's a more appropriate deployment of whoever's in this chair. This is not exclusive to me. I think certainly naming the mayor as ex officio across committees, yes, absolutely. But where there is only one other council colleague, I think it is important that I can fulfill that function of the second council member, if you will. So that may require some further refining of these bylaws, but I would suggest we go down that path. If my council colleagues concur, and I think we do. Okay. All right. If I could move on, I do have questions on a couple of the other terms of reference. Council colleagues, if you can bear with me. Just on CDAC, in terms of the the purpose, the stated purpose, there's 4 areas of identification: the implementation of an economic development strategy, creation of materials, exploring opportunities for strengthening the commercial tax base, and creating and implementing business retention and expansion programs. I know we're right in the middle of the development of an economic development strategy, so this is on my mind anyway. I see that the committee's purpose here is the implementation of the economic development strategy, but not necessarily much influence over the development of the strategy. Of course, I'm assuming that that strategy will come to council, but that we might, in fact, very much welcome the feedback from that committee, which was extremely active in our last term of council. So I'm just curious as to the use of language around this economic development strategy in particular.
Through your worship, I think the development is considered under it being said, but not limited to, but we can certainly add in the development of the ECDEV strategy into that first line.
I think given where we are in the development of the strategy, it probably is practical to at least acknowledge that they will likely have some valuable feedback, and their role isn't necessarily just implementation. And as the strategy evolves, they may identify other things that aren't in the strategy that should be. So I think that would offer more flexibility for the committee. Okay, that's helpful to me on that one. Are there other comments? I know, Council, there's quite a few terms of references here, so I'm not sure if everyone's given a close read to all of them, but this is your opportunity to provide feedback. So I'll go to Councillor O'Sullivan next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to, I guess it would be to Ms. Janot. When I reviewed the terms of reference, and I apologize I didn't get access to my email haven't had access for a little while, but anyway, the terms of reference for the EDI, Advisory Committee, there was a list of groups that should be represented on that EDI committee, and I noted that there was no reference to having a member of any faith community included in that, and I think that would be important to include. So I would like to see that terms of reference amended to reflect that, please.
Okay, so let's, Councillor Sullivan, you've stated your point. Are there any other comments or questions on the advisory committee proposed terms of reference? Okay. So perhaps I would suggest that, just given that there may be some adjustments to ex officio and some feedback for the other committees, Ms. Janot, is it more practical to defer the adoption of the committee terms of reference until you can make those adjustments?
Through your worship, we can do so at your direction. I would suggest that the, I believe what I'm understanding is wanted from the ex officio role can be covered by the amendments that are going to be made to the procedural bylaw.
Okay, I guess we just wanted to, I would have more confidence in the terms of reference if we could take a look at that procedural bylaw before carrying on with the draft terms of reference as they are presented this evening. So can we move to defer this, council colleagues, until that clarity is made?
This won't affect getting notices out for our new committees?
I wouldn't see them as preventing us from doing so.
All right.
Yeah, I think we can quickly turn these around. Okay. Okay, we do have a scheduled meeting next week as well, so perhaps that would do it. Okay. Okay, so but thank you for your indulgence on the variety of matters that we're tackling this evening, and we look forward to getting information out on all 3 committees, the new committees, which are Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, Housing, and Indigenous. What we can also say is that applications for every other committee but those that I've named have been submitted, and council will be considering those applications tomorrow, and they will be brought back in a public session next week for ratification, so we can get those committees going. Councillor Strachan?
Through you, Madam Mayor, can perhaps the clerk's office, if you can confirm what the status is for the Property Standards Committee, please.
Through your worship, the Property Standards Committee, there was some discrepancies in some of the previous bylaws. That one we will be soliciting with the new advisory committees and the Heritage Advisory Committee. So that is scheduled to be done relatively soon. My pleasure.
Okay. So with this in mind, I think there is no adoption this evening. We'll move on and we'll go to our annual drinking water report. Oh, you want a resolution to defer? Okay. Council colleagues, can I have a resolution to defer by a week, please, for the adoption of the terms of reference? Deputy Mayor? Councillor Strachan, thank you. I assume we've had more than sufficient discussion, so I'll call the vote. All in favor? Good, thank you. Okay, so with that, we'll go to our annual drinking water report. The motion is that we receive this report, both in terms of our water system for information purposes, as well as the 2022 annual performance and summary report, which is for information purposes to ensure municipal compliance with the Ontario Safe Drinking Water Act. So I assume, Mr. Finley, you have a quick summary for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right.
So the report in front of Council this evening is the 2022 Annual Performance and Summary Report for the Kemptville Drinking Water System. So for a quick drinking water system description, this serves the urban core of Kemptville. It's approximately 5,500 users. It consists of 4 wells with accompanying pumping stations and 1 booster pumping station, as well as approximately 45 kilometers of distribution piping. That also includes hydrants, valves, and service lines in that grouping as well. And of course, as noted, we disinfect with sodium hypochlorite to treat the drinking water. Next slide. So this is a legislative requirement. It is noted that the operating authority, which is the municipality, provide on an annual basis a performance report to make available to the public, as well as the owner of the system, which is council. Depending on other municipalities, the operating authority may not be the municipalities. So that's where the distinction is between that there. Once after it's received by council, it will be placed on our website and made available for the public at no cost to review the report. Next slide, please. So a few highlights from the report. All our microbiological and chemical testing did conform with our drinking water license. We do have an annual inspection done by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks and Recreation, and we had a rating of 100%, so there was no non-conformances that were identified during our inspection. We did have 7 water main breaks in the 2022 year. However, none resulted in any boil water advisories. They were prepared as quickly as we could. Another item that we did have every 5 years, our sodium levels are measured in the drinking water system. This is natural sodium that occurs in our aquifer, and the results of that were published on our website, which is a direction from the health unit for any sodium levels that exceed 20 milligrams per liter. Our levels typically range between 30 to 40 milligrams per liter, which again is typical not only in North Grenville, but any drinking water system that is served through groundwater wells in Eastern Ontario. So it is typical that we have that. It's a 5-year reporting item through the ministry that we do that. So that's the highlights. I am happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? So I have Councillor Sullivan and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Finney. I just have a question, just for clarification. So the sodium levels need to be tested every 5 years, and they were tested on January 11th and January 13th. Was that the only 2 times they were tested in the 5 years?
Mr. Finley?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. We test each well once every 5 years. Just because of the way the regulations work, it's considered an adverse water incident, and so
Right.
they're tested the second day just to confirm that the testing something wasn't wrong with the testing, and we did results testing the second day with the similar results. So yes, those are the 2 times. The last time we ever done was 2017.
Okay, thank you. And then just to clarify again, the sodium level that's consistently high is just a fact of the natural water aquifer occurring, natural level occurring in our aquifer in this area of Eastern Ontario.
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. The objective to report it is anything above 20 milligrams per liter, but the aesthetic objective through the ministry is anything over 200 milligrams per liter needs to have some try to be rectified, which again ours are around between mid-30s to mid-40s milligrams per liter, so we're well below that aesthetics objective, but it is higher than the 20 milligrams. And if you look around the area through the other local drinking water systems that are served through wells, it is the natural makeup, Munster, Vars, Merrickville, they're all in that 30. Some go as high as 80 on their 5-year reviews. We can only see certain results every 5 years, but it's in that range as well. So it is a local item just with the aquifer that is made up of.
Okay, thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Deputy Director Finley. I note in the report that of the 7 water main breaks, they all happened in the first quarter, and that they all happened in Old Town, 2 on Blossom, 1 each on Thomas, Mary, Reuben, Rideau, and Hilltop. So my question is that a usual number on an annual rate? Are we looking at sort of an average of 5 to 7 water main breaks, and are they all in Old Town?
Mr. Finley?
Through you, Madam Mayor. 7 is typically a little bit high for us. I would say the average would more be 3 to 5. It is correct that it is typically in the older parts of the municipality. Typically, it is the old ductile iron water mains that do crack. The new PVC, we haven't had any issues with the PVC at this moment, so it's the older pieces. What we do find is typically the mains are in pretty good shape. A lot of the time it's the backfill around them and that freeze-thaw cycle that starts moving the ground around that can put some pressure on that ductile iron and we get circumferential cracks that are created from that backfill. We had a few instances in the past where we've had some water main, the actual water main kind of break down, but it's been very rare. Typically it's the backfill that's causing the issues and water hammer.
And what's that word you're using? Did you say backfill?
The backfill, so the gravel that's around the water mains. The newer standards, it's smaller material rather than a large stone. That as that moves, it can push pressure on the main, and of course the iron main then has a crack as it moves and creates a circumferential crack. New standards, that size of backfill, anything larger than 6 inches, is not allowed near the main, so you don't have that those items creating that issue moving forward.
Gotcha. So it's not the pipes themselves, per se? Well, it is, but it isn't. It's the dynamic between the two, is that right?
The construction, yeah, the construction methodology, correct, Madam Mayor. And it is, like I say, we've moved to PVC mains, which have a bit more flexibility. They're not as rigid as the iron mains. So if there happen to be poor backfill around it, it does have a bit more agility to move because of the PVC type of material. The ductile iron doesn't have that, is more rigid. So a bit of movement through that freeze-thaw cycle can create those breaks.
Excellent. Deputy Mayor, was there more here? Okay, excellent. And do you foresee, just given climate change and where we seem to be in Canada in winters, do you foresee more water main breaks by virtue of the differences in that freeze-thaw cycle, that perhaps, there seems to be more of those cycles that might be creating pressures? But I'm not asking you to predict the future. I'm just trying to figure out how you guys sort of are managing Obviously winters that may look or feel a little bit different, maybe not tonight, but, under other circumstances.
That's correct, Madam Mayor. It is difficult to predict. Most of the backfill is proper, so it's just the rare occasions here and there. We do track every year where the locations are and have that mapped out, so we can get a sense of where the problem areas are. The number of backfills or number of water main breaks, can vary greatly. The year before, last year, we didn't have any, and then last year we had 7. So it just depends on the cycle, unfortunately. But I would, as I mentioned to Deputy Mayor Barkley, it is 3 to 5 is typically what we do see in a year, and it's kind of stayed that amount over the past couple of years. But last year was a higher than normal year.
I might, just one other question. If you see one water main break, say on Mary Street, and you sort of stabilize the break, are you likely to see another water main break on that same street? Or, are they heavily localized, or is it really truly very, are they localized to the street, or is it very specific to the actual location where the break occurs, if that makes any sense? Can you sort of figure out any systems-based issues based upon where you see the breaks?
It is difficult, Madam Mayor, to predict that. We do have the typical streets that do have the breaks consistently. Again, those are a lot more of the older streets in downtown Kemptville. But as we revitalize and replace those mains, and then we reduce some of those areas. One that we are looking at this year is the Concession Road Water Main Replacement Project. It had a number of water main breaks along that road, so we did receive some funding for it as well. But as we replace, we can start to localize that to specific areas. But typically there are some streets that we are aware that have breaks regularly.
Like problem areas, if you will.
Correct.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, other questions, colleagues, on this report? I'm sorry, Councillor Wilson, are you there? Okay, I apologize, I really can't see you, nor your hand, so I'm sorry, you have to kind of wave at me. Councillor Strachan, you pulled this from consent. Is there anything you want to add?
No, my council colleagues got all the questions out ahead of me. It's perfect.
Good.
Thanks.
All right. All right, if that's the case, then I'll look to a mover and a seconder for the recommendation as it was read previously. Okay, Councillor Strachan and Deputy Mayor, thank you. If there are no further comments and questions, then I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Good, thank you. So nothing under Parks, Rec and Culture this evening or Emergency and Protective Services. So we're down to introduction and consideration of bylaws. I believe we've dealt with the bylaw for the interim tax levy, is that right?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Any questions? Please, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Oh, the mic's still on. Perfect. Okay, I have a few questions. What is the purpose of each new advisory committee?
Well, I certainly think there's a stated purpose for each terms of reference, right, that has been proposed for those committees. So certainly we could refer you to the proposed language, but certainly, and council colleagues can add, I think it was very clear that on the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee and the Indigenous Advisory Circle that we had made commitments to create more structured forums for members of our community, whether they be Indigenous or members of the Equity, sort of in Diversity, various EDI groups, that they could come together under a municipal advisory committee and really reflect on how are we evolving as a community, what are the needs, where as a municipality should be going. As you know, Jen, on both the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion file and the Indigenous file, we've been making some significant headway in terms of developing municipal frameworks and strategies so that we are supporting a critical conversation around truth and reconciliation, and of course on EDI, which is very common in many municipalities. It's very common that municipalities and governments writ large are really looking very closely at how to become more inclusive and responsive to a diverse range of residents. So the purpose of the committees is to really create a space and a time, and to ensure that recommendations and perspectives are subsequently shared with council through the deliberations of the committees.
Thank you. So when will applications open for the new committees?
I would say within the month, once we adopt the final terms of reference, at the very latest.
Should be by the end of February then?
Or early March.
Okay.
I can't remember where we are in February, but
And that's advertised on the municipal website?
they would be advertised like any other committee. Ms. Janou, do you want to speak to promotions?
Through your worship, so yes, we will advertise just as the other committees have been, including on the municipal website, our social media channels, as well as in the paper.
Okay, perfect. So what is the difference between the Affordable Housing Task Force that you started, Mayor, and the new Housing Committee?
Yes, thank you. Really, actually, one of the crucial recommendations out of the Affordable Housing Task Force was to establish a standing municipal advisory committee that would deal specifically with the housing realities in North Grenville, some of the challenges of growth, and whether or not the overall housing stock, whether it be, houses that are owned or rental units, to make sure that we were getting good feedback from the community on whether or not they felt that the housing stock as it exists and the rental stock as it exists, or as we foresee it to be, was meeting the needs of residents in the community. So it goes well beyond the lens of affordable, which was what the Affordable Housing Task Force was very much preoccupied, was how to create affordable housing. This is intended to go broader and look overall at our housing needs and how we're responding to those needs. We know that there are many different voices in the community in regards to, is it seniors housing, is it veterans housing, is it housing for young families, is it housing for young adults? Not everyone that I've just named needs affordable housing, but all of them need some form of housing if they want to live in North Grenville. So the idea with the advisory committee was to, again, provide a structured, regular time for members of our community to come together and hear from our planning staff and hear about funding opportunities and possibilities around how we might better respond to the needs of people at all stages of life.
Okay, so basically the EDI and the Indigenous Advisory Council are geared towards improving conversations around diversity, and then the housing is a byproduct of the affordable.
It is.
Okay,
It is, absolutely.
got my ducks in a row.
Yes,
Perfect.
you,
Okay.
you did very well.
Will the Indigenous Advisory Council be comprised of solely Indigenous members of the community?
Majority. I don't think exclusively Indigenous, but majority is the intention. I think I saw that in the proposed terms of reference. Is that right, Ms. Janou?
Correct. I'm just pulling it up. I believe we said 50%. Nope, just majority. Majority of the members shall be Indigenous.
That is all my questions.
Great, thank you. Okay. If there were no other questions, did we receive anything by email? I assume not. Okay, excellent. Then we are moving on, colleagues, to confirmation bylaw, and that is that bylaw 1923 to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on Feb 21 be adopted and passed. And I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Wilson, maybe you want to move that. Thank you. Now I see your hand. And Councillor O'Sullivan. I'll call the question on that. All in favor? Good. And then a motion to adjourn, which is non-debatable, adjourning at 7:32 on Feb 21st. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for that. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Strachan, and that is that we adjourn. So all in favor, please.